Hi, my name's Dee, your Professor of Woo Woo, and welcome again to Sunchild Tarot, and welcome back to special guest Travis McHenry. How are you doing, Travis?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
So I've invited you back on because you have a Kickstarter on the go that you mentioned in the last show that we did for the Egyptian Star Oracle. Now it's up and running now. How's it going? Tell me everything.
It's going very well. I launched it on November 3rd, which is the culmination of the star Sirius here in Las Vegas. And it's going very well. You know, our first day, I think we hit our goal in 17 minutes. So it was pretty nice. Impressive. And it's just been sort of plugging along since then. Almost all the limited edition rewards are gone. And there's only a few mummies left. That's all that's left on the limited edition rewards, but plenty of decks and books and everything else are still available.
So you've also been out doing demonstration readings as well at, I did notice you'd posted about that. How did it go?
I was at, very well, actually. I was at a local store here in Vegas called the Bloodstone Boutique. And after talking about the, sort of Egyptian astrology and that astrological system for about an hour and a half, I spent about 30 minutes doing readings with this deck for people who were present. It was my first time really using it to try and do readings. And I'll tell you what, it was really strange. The same card, I mean, look, there's only 36 cards in the deck, but still, the same card came up for almost every single person I did a reading for, which is, I don't think that's actually possible by the laws of probability. And the card was this one. Hang on, let me show it to you. This card here, I don't know if you can see what that says. It's fertility and sex.
Right.
Okay. So, and every single person I did readings for were all women. And of course, it's one of the cards in the deck that has a woman on it. And really, it's almost like the Empress is what this card is like. So It was weird that it kept popping up over and over and over again. And then afterwards, like they came up to each individual woman came up to me and one said, the fertility part really resonates with me because I have my own business. And another one came up and said, you had sex all throughout my reading. I'm a dominatrix. That's what I do for a living. I'm like, holy cow. Okay.
I was going to say, does that say something about Las Vegas? But I'm not sure I dare.
So I'll tell you, the deck has turned out to be more accurate than I really thought it would be. So I'm pretty happy with that.
So tell us about the deck then.
Okay, so the deck is 36 cards, and every card has on it some really key elements of Egyptian culture and Egyptian astrology. So the first thing you notice, of course, is the main image on the card. I actually took these from original Egyptian sources, either the wall of a tomb that I went into and took a picture of it, or pieces of papyrus or pieces of pottery or wherever they came from. They came from authentic Egyptian sources. And underneath it here, you've got the meaning of the name. So this is, what does that, when this particular deity, the Deccan, which is pictured right here, when that rises in the sky, what did the Egyptians think was happening at that time? What was that week all about? And that's where this comes from. And then up here, you've got information about the Deccan. So it's number, which is just a convenient way of sort of plotting out what week it's rising, the name, the translation, and then this is really important, the name in hieroglyphics.
Right.
And the reason that's important is because the Egyptians believed if you write something down, it's sacred. It's as though that thing is real in front of you, which is very similar to how ritual magicians use sigils. As you're writing the sigil, you're creating like a calling card for that spirit to come into your life. And that's exactly the way hieroglyphics were used. So on the background of each card, it's probably difficult to see, but behind this image here, there's a background that is the pyramid texts, which were just spells evoking various spirits and asking for protection or guidance or things like that. So every single one has a different piece of the pyramid spell behind it. So they're all unique backgrounds. And the cool thing about that is these are the pyramid spells that are used to evoke the spirits of the Decans. So it's just like in my previous deck, the Angel Tarot and the Occult Tarot, where I had the invocations printed on the cards. Yep. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. Yep. So as you're using these cards, you can also use them for ritual evocation of the Decans. Yeah, I took these myself. I didn't just get these pyramid texts online. I got them in the pyramid of Titi down underneath the earth, crawling through a tunnel, and came into the antechamber, and from floor to ceiling and wall to wall filled with pyramid texts that I had been studying for almost a year. And then to see them in person like that, my knees got weak and I started crying. And my research assistant took a picture of me down there, and I'm facing away from the camera, so you can't see that I've got tears in my eyes.
Well, I've seen some footage of your journey to Egypt on your YouTube channel. Do you want to just give your YouTube channel a plug while you're here?
Sure. I actually don't even know what the address is. If you go
down
perfect. But if you go to my website, either travismchenry.com, there's a link to it there, or you can go to bloodstone.info, which is my sort of occult site. There's links to all the videos on the videos page.
Right. So tell us about the Deckhands themselves then, because to me as an astrologer, Deccan is 10 degrees of the Zodiac, and therefore it's a geographical position. Now, you mentioned in the last video that this is starts from the heliachal rising of Sirius in whatever area you're in. So is it then that you are measuring these Decans 10 degrees from that one point in Gemini as it came over is it Gemini or Cancer? I think it's Gemini.
It was Cancer. It's now, it's actually now in Leo. In most latitudes, it's now in Leo, yeah.
I should have looked that up.
Okay. That's okay. So it changed. It was Cancer for the entire time that the Egyptians were working with Sirius. It was rising in the second or third degree of Cancer, but it started in the first degree of Cancer. So it's slowly, moving. Its heliachal rise is moving back throughout the course of the year. So I'm going to show you a picture first, and then we'll talk about what the Decans are. So I want you to see these 3 images down here. This is from the Guidebook. So you see those things? So those are 3 of the 36 Decans. So those are not degrees; those are actual beings. Those are actual, spirits, creatures, deities, if you will. So the Egyptians viewed these spirits as lords of the sky, and they were represented by individual stars. That's a really, really important and fundamental concept of Egyptian astrology, and it's what separates it from Hellenistic astrology. So the Egyptians believed that these stars that they saw in the sky, these specific stars, were actually the souls of primordial gods that had tried to rebel against Ra, and Ra had sort of grabbed them by the hair and smited them and cut them into pieces and threw them into the sky. So when he cut them into pieces, the individual pieces were also powerful gods in their own right. Just like, the toenail of a saint can still bring you divine power. Well, the thumbnail of Orion was its own Decan, and the elbow and the shoulder and the lower leg and all those other body parts. So the individual stars were the actual Ba's, the mobile manifestation of their eternal soul. So, and they didn't think all stars were this, just these specific stars, the 36 ones called the Decans. And the reason these specific stars were chosen, really there's 2 reasons. Number one, they were bright, the brightest stars in the night sky that they could see. Obviously, they didn't have telescopes, so they were using, their own visual acuity. And number 2, they had a specific life cycle. Now, the planets, they knew the difference between a planet and a star. Okay, the planets move in a circular motion. These stars are doing something that they called rising and setting. Okay, so throughout the life cycle of a single star, it has its heliachal rise. That means it appears on the horizon just before sunrise. And they would see that and say, okay, so this week now, we know that star is ruling over this week. Okay, it's 10 days, 10 days in an Egyptian week. And then to extrapolate outward, you've got 360 days in the Egyptian year plus 5 extra days. So their calendar would begin, that's the first week, and then just work its way down. Okay. So Sirius rises, we say it's in Cancer, but actually it's not. its heliachal rise occurs when the sun is in the constellation of Cancer. So that's the way the two astrological systems are able to be sort of melded together. It's not degrees of the sky, it's not degrees of the zodiac, it's individual stars. And at what point in the year do they have that first rise above the horizon? So then throughout the course of the year, the star Sirius will rise and set each night, okay? And it's getting a little higher, and that's its culmination, which for me happened November 3rd. And then eventually it starts setting. It culminates over and over again. Eventually it starts rising lower and lower in the sky until around May 15th, I think. It's going to disappear below the horizon for 70 days. Now that motion, okay? Coming to life, rising to power, and then disappearing, dying for 70 days, and then reborn again on the horizon next year in August or whatever it'll be. The Egyptians saw that motion and said, well, this is kind of like Osiris, isn't it? He was born, he rose to power, he was killed, and then died for a while, and then was reborn, came back to life. So the life cycle of Sirius was equated to the life cycle of Osiris. And this is why that star became so important. Now there's other stars that follow Sirius and that come before Sirius. So they were able to track all those out and said, okay, all these stars, these are all the same kind of a star. They all have the same kind of emotion. They must all be together. I guess they're all the spirits of these deceased primordial gods. And that's how they developed this system. So it's not degrees of the zodiac, it's actual individual gods that are rising and falling every night and shining their power upon us.
Or as you were saying, bits of gods.
Bits of gods, yes, it actually is. Literally, one is called the arm of Sa, who is Orion, or Shah, you could call him. One is actually his upper arm. Another one is the hind part of the cow, which literally means the cow's like vagina area. And you say, well, what the hell could that possibly mean? Why would a star or a god be called, the hind part of the cow? Well, let me show you here. I've got so when I was in the tombs of Asut, I found this drawing on the tomb wall of a man giving birth, helping a cow give birth. Well, then it instantaneously made sense to me. Under the hind part of the cow, birth, change, some kind of a difference in your life that you're going for a transition from one space to another, i.e. coming out of the womb and coming into existence. So things like that, actually going to Egypt and looking at these tombs helped me understand what some of these names meant. And you've got like the crane, the decans of the crane are all, the upper wing, the lower wing, the start of the crane, the end of the crane. Well, those are all grouped together. It's not a constellation. It's simply a grouping of stars in the order that they're passing through the night sky.
So how would you use this Egyptian star? Because my mind's on fire with some of these questions. Since the Decans are periods of time rather than something that could be overlaid onto the tropical or sidereal zodiac using the heliachal rise of Sirius, does that mean you've got Sirius or whichever god rising over here, and at the same time, say you've got a conjunction of two planets? So is it irrelevant where the two planets are, but relevant when the two planets conjoin? Or how does this express itself further?
So, okay, honestly, I'm still working on this part of it. So at the earliest form of this Egyptian astrology, it was irrelevant. Where the planets were, that was a separate thing. Even the Egyptians themselves didn't link the stars with the planets. They viewed them as completely separate. Yeah. Because the planets were generally assigned to actual gods. Just like the sun was Ra and the moon was Horus. So, but later, towards the Roman period, at least, that changed. And we know that for a fact because there are horoscopes that were written during that period that talk about Sirius rising with Venus. Now, they wouldn't mention that unless it was relevant. In the earliest astrology, no, it had nothing to do with each other. In the later forms of astrology, yes, it did matter where the planets were, what was happening with the other constellations, and when those stars were rising. And one other interesting element is it wasn't just the heliachal rise. It was also what star is culminating on that day, what star is disappearing into the duat, into the underworld on that day. And even hour by hour, you know, when we look at the angels, we know that they rule over certain hours of the day. That comes from this concept. It really does. You can look at the Greek magical papyri, which is the oldest Hermetic document that exists, and they conflate the angels and the archangels and the Decans all as spirits of the air. They were all considered the same thing. So, and there they are ruling over each individual hour. That's the way the Egyptians tracked the stars. They said the first hour is this, the second hour is that, third is okay, fourth hour, now we're in the 12th hour, now it's daytime again. So they really cared. In fact, that's where the word horoscope comes from, horoscopus. Horo is hour. So, in fact, the Egyptian star priests were called hour watchers. That was actually their name. So it wasn't just where the planets are, where the stars are, it was even which star is rising in that specific hour. Oh, if your kid was born at that time, that's the star that was in the culminating position in that exact hour. So it's really detailed. There's so much more information that I'm able to just, you know, sort of spew out. But I tried to put all of it into the book that I'm working on, Cult of the Stars, which sort of accompanies this deck.
So what you're saying, if we was to draw an analogy with modern, I mean, like modern with a small m, modern as in compared to ancient Egypt, not modern with a capital M, modern astrology, but we know that we have our sun sign, our moon sign, our rising sign. But from what you're saying, to an extent, it's as the sky passes over, it's who's above the horizon and who isn't. So you've got the heliachal rising star, culminating star, the descending star, and that will go through a pattern throughout the day, as well as when stars
throughout your whole life.
70 days. So yeah, so there's plenty of variables for people to work with who like mixing and matching all the data.
There really are. And the good thing about today, you know, living in our modern world is we've got the technology to just go on to an astronomical computer program, and you can plot out where these things are, what's happening any hour of the day, any time of the week. There's, you know, astrophysicists have done work all the way back into ancient Egypt to say, okay, on this day in 1534 BC, Sirius rose at this exact time on this day. They're able to do that information because it's all mathematical, really. And it's absolutely incredible. So if someone wanted to really pursue this and create a personal astrology, which is different from what's on these cards. You know, the cards are, here's what's happening over the week for everybody on Earth. But if you want to do a personal astrology, knowing the person's hour of birth, the day of birth, you could extrapolate all that stuff out using astronomical software.
So alongside the cards in the Kickstarter and all the various traditional Kickstarter, what do you call them? Bonus stuff?
Inferior, yeah, the bonus stuff.
There's you're also offering a course about this, or will be offering a course about this.
Yeah, so I started getting so many requests for more information about the actual form of Egyptian astrology that I'm using for this deck, that I realized people need to be educated before they can really start working with it and understand it. Now, look, the deck comes with a really thick guidebook. Okay, this is big. I put a lot of information in here. You read this, you're going to know what you're doing with the deck. And of course, the meanings of the cards are printed right on the cards, so you can use it and understand it. But if you want to get a higher level understanding, you have to be educated about it. And believe me, you do not want to do what I did, which was read like 60, 70 scientific papers and dozens of scientific books that were not only hard to find, but very expensive to purchase from rare booksellers. you don't want to spend your life doing that. So I created a course. I put all this material together into an online course. Right now it's free. I'll probably start charging for it next year, after a few people have got into it and they can share information word of mouth. So yeah, I'm hopefully going to launch it next week. It'll be on my website, bloodstone.info. There's a courses tab. Just click on that and it'll be one of the free courses available.
And when does the Kickstarter actually finish?
The Kickstarter finishes December 3rd, I think, or December 2nd. I can't remember which.
Right. So will you come back and tell us about how it went?
I will. Yeah.
There's thank you, Charlie. I can't think of anything else to ask. Is there anything else that you're wanting to add? Because this is a subject that I know so little about at the moment.
Right. So actually, yeah, there is one important thing that I discovered along the way while I was doing this research, and I think it's right up your alley. So as I said before, the early Hermetic scholars, these were Greek, for the most part, Greek scholars who were studying at the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, right after, in the first 200 or 100 years or so after Alexander the Great's conquest. So Egypt was now being ruled by Greeks, and they allowed Persian scholars, from Babylonian background, Jewish scholars, African scholars, and the Greek scholars all were mixing. It was a melting pot with the Egyptian scholars. So everyone's studying, they're learning each other's systems and trying to find some sort of universal truth in all of this. And that's where Hermeticism comes from. That tradition came out of that. So the Greek magical papyri conflates the Decans with angels because they were all considered spirits of the air. Now, if you follow the textual tradition, you can actually see how it went from being these angels and spirits of the air to being conflated with the 72 Kabbalistic angels. Okay, at some point, the Hermetic scholars decided to split the zodiac from 10 degrees down to 5 degrees, quinary, and they doubled the number of spirits that were ruling over the zodiac. But really, those 10 degrees are still devoted to the Decans. And then when the concept of demons came along in the New Testament, they actually used, in the Greek New Testament, they used the same word, daimon, D-A-I-M-O-N-E-S, to describe the demons, like the demon-possessed man in the Gospel of Mark. That's the exact same word that the Greeks used to describe the Decans. They were considered these sort of lesser gods or lower gods. Now, there's a book written in 600 AD, and it's another Hermetic work, Stabalis Hermeticum or something like that. Mm-hmm. So in there, he specifically says this guy must have known about the Christian Hermeticists conflating demons with daemons, with the Decans, because he talks about the 36 Decans, and then he actually says some call them daimons, but they are not daimons. They are their own thing. They're their stars in the sky. And that's 600 AD. He's actually mentioning that, but nobody seemed to care, because then the Testament of Solomon comes along in 1000 AD or 1300 AD, which is a seminal work in occult literature. And there's Solomon summoning the 36 demons of the zodiac. And the demons all do the same things. They have the same actions and functions. They're able to cause bloodshed or war on earth. They're able to have specific diseases, like diseases of the eye, diseases of the stomach, that they can control. That textual tradition goes all the way back to authentic Egyptian sources that talk about the Decans before the Greeks came, before the Persians came, back in 600 BC. So you've got a textual tradition that talks about these things as spirits having specific influence over us on earth. And it goes all the way into what we're using today. So when you're summoning the 72 demons of the Goetia or the 72 Kabbalistic angels, you're actually working with these decanal spirits. That's at least sort of the theory that I've kind of put together based on the textual traditions.
Well, that reminds me of two things. I mean, first, what you're saying, that also explains why Isis and Osiris ended up as two of the daimons for Cosmas of Jerusalem, where he attributed the spirits to the zodiacal decans. But also, when we was chatting last time, I was mentioning, I can't remember whether this was on camera or not, but I was mentioning about the goetic spirits ruling 10 degrees zodiacal decans, one by day and one by night. And you said that evolved from the Egyptian tradition as well, the day and night difference.
Yeah, it absolutely did. So the Egyptians knew that even when it's daytime, when Ra is passing across the sky in his solar bark, the Decans are still there. Those entities are still there. They don't actually just disappear. It's just that we can't see them. So they understood some of the mechanics of astrophysics, of the way the universe actually works. So yeah, they knew that some would be ruling during the day, and they were, once they got good enough, once they had the system down, they could chart all these stars out. They knew just mathematically who is going to be where during any time of the day. And so that's why if your kid was born, you would call an astrologer. This is 2100, 2200 BC, okay? If your kid is going to be born, the wife's going into labor, you'd call the astrologer over, and he knew in that moment, okay, the kid's about to be born. I sort of know where everything is, even though it's daytime. He could jot down for you what stars were ruling and what the kid was going to turn out to be like. And that was considered like a service, but it was an expensive service.
I was going to say, I assume that means that even then astrology was the art of kings, because you would have to have quite a lot of wonga to get dialer an astrologer.
So it was mostly for the noble classes, because these astrologers would have been priests of the temple. And so, yeah, to get them out of their temple to come see you was like getting a doctor to do a house call. If you weren't a king or a nobleman or somebody with a little bit of money, you weren't going to be having these kind of astrological readings, which is why there's almost no evidence of them. They were jotting them down on papyrus or on pieces of broken pottery. Well, I mean, 4,000-year-old piece of papyrus is not going to hold up very well, especially when there were so few of them. It's not like the Babylonian clay tablets. They wrote their horoscopes on these pieces of clay in cuneiform, and the earliest of those we've got is 408 BC or 410 BC, somewhere around there. And that was the first time that a horoscope was written for someone other than the king or the country as a whole.
Yeah. So, like I say, you finish, I've forgotten the date now again already, December 3rd?
Around December 2nd, yeah, December 2nd, December 3rd, yeah.
Right. So all the links will be down below for the Kickstarter, for bloodstone.info, for the courses that are on there already and when they appear, and I cannot wait to get my hands on the deck of those. You will be seeing them appear in my readings once I get my head around them as well. So yeah, that's it then, really, isn't it, Travis? Thank you so much for coming back on, and we will see you in like about a month's time. You can tell us about how well it's all going.
Sounds good. Great talking to you again.